Hey world, we are Citywide Church, creating the largest soul-saving effort ever seen right here in Bridgeport, Connecticut. We want to thank you for tuning into this week's podcast. We would love to know how our ministry has touched your life. So if you have a couple of minutes, please send us an email at amen@citywidechurch.us. Also, if you would like more information about us or about how to support this ministry financially, you can visit our website at www.citywidechurch.us. Thank you again for listening, and as always, be encouraged and stay blessed.
Glad to be here today. How many of you like driving in the snow? I've been having so much fun these past couple of days driving in the snow. I love driving I think my love for driving in the snow has a connection to the vehicle that I own. That might be a preaching there in and of itself. But I want to let you know that I love driving in the snow. And I've been seeing so many people just like complain about the situation of the roads, but when you're in the right vehicle, this is going to preach to somebody. Doesn't matter what the condition on the external, you can get through it all. But the thing that bothers me about driving in the snow is people who don't know how to drive in the snow. And I don't know how you can live in New England and not know how to drive in the snow. And then some people think they know how to drive in the snow, but they don't. Rear-wheel drive cars do not belong in the snow. You should probably stay home. Keep the Hondas home. Half of y'all can't drive now. If it's past 2007, leave it home. Leave the sports car home. Don't bring the Hyundai Genesis out. It's not going to work. And the problem about driving in the snow sometimes is like, I was driving on the highway, and I was driving before it was even cleared. And there was people just like doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And I was trying to get somewhere alive, let alone on time. And these people are just like cutting you off. And like when you get cut off on the highway, it can become problematic for your spirituality. I wish I had a witness in the building. Let alone get cut in a line. Have you ever been waiting in a line and somebody comes? Like CVS does this a lot. They'll have 17 registers and one line. And apparently, to me, the next register, I'm just gonna walk up to the register. But sometimes you're in a line and somebody comes up from this side of the line and the line is this way and they think that they're next and you didn't want to be unsafe, so you say something like half safe, like, well, I guess nobody sees a line over on this left side of me. Or if you're with somebody or you're on the phone, I guess you're just today must be cut the line day and you get really perturbed when you get cut off from this line. Have you ever waited on the phone line a long time, and then the next thing you know, you get dial tone, and you're like, I waited for 47 minutes to talk to the IRS, and somebody just hung up on me. I wish I had a witness. Like, getting cut off really is tough sometimes. It can really mess with your spirituality. I think Paul agrees with that in Galatians 5:7, where he says, who cut in on you from believing the truth? Didn't know I was already preaching? He says, who cut in on you from believing the truth? He starts it off by saying, look to the person next to you, say, you were running good. You were running a good race. In other words, he's saying your Christian walk was like on fire. Today's terminology, it was on fleek. They still using fleek out there, the kids? Who knows? You were doing so good. What cut in on you? He goes further. To keep you from obeying the truth. Man, it's going to be a really good first of the year message. Praise the Lord. Verse 8, that kind of persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. Paul's like, listen, you're doing some things that you've been persuaded to do by some other things and people that I didn't teach you. What I'm trying to tell you is that that's not from God, your Father. A little yeast works through the whole batch of dough. Verse 10, but I'm confident in the Lord that you would take no other views. I'm confident in my God that you would take no other views. Come on, let's pray. Father, we thank you right now for your word. It's already blessed. We ask you now that you would just have your way. Speak to our hearts as we start this new year in prayer and fasting. Lord, bring us a word in this morning, God. Let our hearts be attentive. Let distractions be reduced, oh God. Let us focus our hearts and fixate our attention on you, God, that you would be glorified in Jesus' name. Come on, the church says. Paul says, you were running a good race. Paul has in the imagery of his mind here, he grew up in Tarsus as a little boy. He has in the imagery of his mind the races maybe at the smaller amphitheaters and coliseums of Tarsus where the racers would race and they would go around. And he was like, man, he's using this terminology and this metaphorical picture to draw to the Christian and the believer this idea of their Christian walk. And he's equating their Christian walk to a race. And he says, you were running a good race. You guys are doing so good, but something has come in and stopped you from believing the truth about what I have taught you. He says, who cut in on you? That's the New International Version. He says, who cut you off? What has transpired in your life that you are no longer believing the truth of God the way you once did? What has happened to you that has changed your view so much that you are far from where I left you? You see, Paul is talking to a church in Galatia, and Galatia is just a province in the Roman Empire, and he's gone there as a missionary years prior, and he's built up this church, and he taught them for a couple of years. He spent a lot of time with them, and he planted a church, and he groomed them, and he taught them, and he raised up leaders, and then he left to go to the next place. But when Paul left, false teachers came in. When Paul left, false teachers came in and began to teach a different version of the gospel of Jesus Christ to these people. In theology, we call them Judaizers. These Judaizers, don't mean to get too deep with you, but a Judaizer is someone in the New Testament who would try to mix the law of Moses with the gospel of grace. They would try to mix the free salvation of God and the works of man together. And they would say, well, you have to still get circumcised, you have to still follow all these protocols, and you have to still do all of these things. And Paul's like, well, if you had to do all of those things, then why would you need Jesus? Because Jesus fulfills the law for us, right? Jesus is the one who gives us salvation. It's a free act of God's mercy and grace to give us salvation on behalf of Jesus. And this church has been tricked into believing a different way. And so the book of Galatians is actually a stern rebuke from the Apostle Paul. In one version of the Bible, in one paragraph of this chapter, he basically tells them that they're under a bewitching spell. Who has bewitched you, he says, you foolish Galatians. He's like, you guys are so stupid. Like, why could you fall for something so false when I taught you the truth? I wish I had a witness in this building today that you might have one time had a stern truth in your life, but as life came against you, you no longer know what truth is in some areas of your walk with God. You were running a good race. Contextually, this entire book is a severe rebuke about false teaching. He had built this church, he had sowed into them, he had done so much. He gives them this encouragement. On one hand, you were running a good race. When I left, you were doing good. You were firing on all cylinders. You were praying, you were seeking the Lord. You were doing the work of the kingdom. You were feeding the hungry. You were clothing the naked. You were giving a roof and shelter to the homeless. You were doing all these right things. But then I hear about this, and now I'm writing this letter to rebuke. And so Paul was basically contrasting their previous position with their current condition. And he says, man, I remember what you were like, and I look at you now. Have you ever met somebody who you knew used to love God, be on fire for God, and now they're in the world, on social media, cussing, swearing, drinking, partying, and you're like, man, you used to be so on fire for God. That's contrasting their previous position with their current condition. That's saying, man, when I look back, I don't know what happened to you, but what I do know is that you have had some things cut you off. What has cut you off in your walk with God to keep you from believing even the smallest truths about God's purposes for your life, God's plans for your life, God's belief about you, what God says about you, who God says you are? Paul comes back in, he looks at the church, and he finds it to be lacking in what he had left them to see. He's pointing out all these deficiencies in their lives. He says, who has cut you off? What has stopped you from believing the truth? What has stopped you about believing God's best for your life, church? What has stopped you about believing God's promises over your life? What has stopped you from running the race of this gospel of grace that God has given you? What have you allowed, or who have you allowed to cut you off in this line? You see, when we're cut off in the flesh, we get mad. Don't let nobody cut you off in the Walmart line. You've been waiting long enough. But when the enemy comes and cuts you off in your spirit, we take it lying down. Paul says, who cut you off? You were running this good race. As you go into this new year, it's only fair, as we're already here and we're transitioning in, it's only fair to look at our lives today and say, man, have I been cut off in any area that I once was on fire, but now I have a small ember? Because the truth of the matter is, we love to make excuses for our deficiencies. That won't be popular. I had in my note, just wait for the silence there. Yeah. We love to be like, well, it's because of my job, and it's so much going on. And it's just like, man, when are you going to stop making excuses for your lack of fire for the Lord? And realize that you have allowed so many things to take precedence over God. It's only right that in this time of the year that we go before the Lord and we say, God, have I stopped running after you the way you've called me to? Have I stopped pursuing you? And what we like to do sometimes is look at all the areas that we're better at. And we use that famous line, at least I'm not where I used to be, but I'm better than where I was. And that's only good for the first 6 months of walking with God. And at some point, we have to go for God's best and stop settling for better. Because God has the best in mind. And here's the thing, Satan will allow you to be better, but he doesn't want you to achieve best. Because best says sold out to God, better says not where I don't have total control anymore, but I have something in their lives. Best says, I have completely given everything to God, all of my hurts, my pains, my offenses, my own spirit. I've given everything to God, all of my attitude, everything I've given it to him. Better says, I'm slowly progressing, and I might take 30 years to reach where God wants me to go in 5 months. But we're satisfied because we're better. We're doing all right. Who cut you off? As you know, I always preach with 3 points, and I have one for you right here. And it's really simple. It's actually not a statement. It's more of a question that I would ask you to really reflect on in the following moments, in the following days and weeks ahead, that you would really say, God, man, is this me? What am I doing in my life? God, what are you saying to me right now? Here's point number 1, really simple. Has what you're facing changed who you're chasing? Has what you're facing in your life, in your circumstances, changed who you're chasing? Because we start off with this idea of loving God so much and this passion for the Lord, and then slowly but surely, it happens so quickly that sometimes we don't realize it. Is what you're going through shifting who you're going to? Is what you're dealing with stopping you from seeking the Lord? You see, when you're in pursuit of God, you're facing him. Right? That's what pursuing God means, to have the light of God's countenance on me. In other words, that word countenance is the simple word. The definition is face. It means that God is looking at me. And when we walk in the presence of the Lord, the word presence in Hebrew is the word face. And all that means is that God's face is looking at me. And when we're in the presence of God, it simply means that God is focused on me as much as I am focused on God. And when we're seeking him, we do that with our whole heart, and we look to him, and our heart is his, our will is his. We're okay enduring hardship because God is with us. We're okay sacrificing because we know it's for the Lord. But there comes a season where the enemy comes in and he takes away the joy of our salvation. And part of the joy of your salvation is being able to endure a hard time and still walk away with Jesus. Part of the joy of salvation is going through a tough season, understanding that God is still there with you. Part of the joy of your salvation is knowing that you're living right before the Lord. And he will take whatever he can from you. The psalmist writes in Psalms 27:8, you have said, meaning the psalmist says, God, you have said this, seek my face. And he responds, and my heart says to you, your face, Lord, do I seek. Paul realized that in the absence of his personhood, the church had been swindled into believing all these false things. And sometimes it's not the moments of coming to church that are the hard times. It's when you leave this place, all the lies of the enemy and the constant barrage against your soul that are hindering you from walking with the Lord. You see, Paul understood that when they had faced false teaching, they weren't strong enough to endure it. What are you facing that is changing who you're chasing? Because most people come and they start on fire for the Lord. Most people treat Christianity rather as they do the gym, if you know what I'm talking about. You see, when you first get that, I'm going to go back to working out. And you make sure you have all the right things that you need. Because you want no excuses. You want to even eliminate excuses for yourself. So you get gloves if you need weightlifting gloves. And you make sure you get the perfect earbuds that won't interfere with your exercising. And you make sure your phone is charged up. And if you want to go running, you get the little sleeve thing for an iPod or for your phone or for whatever else. Or back in the day maybe. You get all these different things. Some of you guys get wristbands and headbands and all these. And the girls get their tights and they get their gym bras and everything else. I'm going to do it. And then you go on there. I'm going to start cardio first. You go at a 6.0 speed and you kill yourself the first day. So much so you can't go back for 2 weeks. That's how most people handle Christianity. They go full speed when Paul says you should run this race with patience. And it's those moments where we go all in so fast. And am I saying don't go all in? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is pace yourself. Because this Christian walk is going to pull things out of you and change you so much so. And Paul says, man, you foolish Galatians, who cut in on you? You were following God. You were chasing after the heart of Papa God. You were there. You were after his heart. And now you look at you guys. I come back and there's a mess here. And sometimes it just happens so fast when you fall away from different areas of your passion. And sometimes you don't even realize it. And sometimes the reason we don't realize that we're so losing passion and fire for God is because we busy ourselves with other things. And before you even know it, you've fallen out of true love with God. And here's how you know. I'm going to give you, I don't know why I'm saying this. I'm going to give you a surefire way to know if you've fallen out of love with God. If you have the ability to hate people, you don't love God. Darkness and light can't coexist in that sense. The Bible is either all in or all out. And God's like, you have to love people the way I love you. And you see, the more that you get away from God, you're angry at people. You're mad, you're snapping, you don't love them the way God tells you to. You're just like, and then it stops bothering you that you don't even care anymore. And then it's like, man, how far, you can know the motions of loving God. You can know the motions of seeking God. You can know the motions of it, but in reality, have you fallen from that place that God, what cut in on you from believing the truth? You see, Paul was rebuking them for listening to the wrong voices. Paul says, you have sought the wrong voices. You have looked at the wrong things. You have heard and believed the wrong thing. You've taken a lie as truth. And because here's point number 2, what Paul understood, that wrong voices lead to wrong choices. That when you give ear to the enemy, when you give ear to the enemy of your soul, and they begin to lie to you, begin to tell you different things, they begin to misguide and mislead your life. It takes the small choices from these little voices, these false teaching voices. I wonder, do you have any false teachers in your life? I wonder if you have any false voices in your life. I wonder if there are any teachers who are always talking in your ear. You see, in Paul's context, he was talking about false doctrine. And maybe your problem really isn't false doctrine, but maybe you're believing lies of the enemy in your life. Wrong voices lead to wrong choices. They tell you things that are contrary to God's best for you, contrary to God's plans. What are some of the false teachers that might be in your life? How about this? Ungodly friends. Now, am I saying you can't have ungodly friends? Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. Because if you had no ungodly friends, how are you going to lead anybody to Jesus? But when you start beginning to allow them to impact you more than you impact them. You see, Psalms 1, verse 1. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked. I'll just read that again for y'all. Blessed or highly favored or happy is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of a sinner, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. Sometimes it just starts with bad advice from people with good intentions. I've seen 1,000 people in church fall away from bad advice with good intentions. Bad friends, you just need to go out tonight and have a drink with me. And one drink turns into 5 drinks, which turns into another alcoholic lifestyle. And these voices of these lying friends who want to do, they just want to see you happy. And they want what God wants. They want your joy and your happiness to return because they know you're not right. But a good friend would say, man, you are off sync with that God thing you used to love so much. You should go back to that. And we listen to these false teachers of these friends who will counsel us in ways that don't honor God and don't please God. And these relationships we have that aren't of God, and you're on fire for God, but then you get involved with somebody who doesn't know the Lord. And the Bible tells us so clearly as Christians that we should not yoke ourselves to you don't want to get into that conversation too much. And these things come and they begin to get more of our heart than God does. It's a false teacher. It's a false teacher. We begin to believe these things, and they tell you other things contrary to what God has spoken over our lives. And instead of them learning your ways, you're following theirs. And you're not pursuing God the way you once were. For some people, it might be the pursuit of joy that's your false teacher. It might be the pursuit of fulfillment. It might be that one thing you wanted from God so much, that job, that career, that ended up being the very thing that has pulled you away from God and pulled your family apart. And what you thought you needed, you did not need. You took their counsel as truth, even though it opposed God's word. It's a false teacher. How about, I'm going to get in trouble here today. How about the false teacher and the lying voice of your own emotions? This one. Mark this down on your phone so you can go back in the podcast. Sometimes the very thing that pushes us away from God is our own unchecked emotions. The Message Bible in Proverbs 14:30 says this: a sound mind makes for a robust body, but runaway emotions corrode the bones. Runaway emotions rot your bones out, it's saying. Runaway emotions can literally break down the structure of your life. Runaway emotions can literally lead to rottenness from the inside. That you begin to hate people, hold grudges, unforgiving, looking at people in ways that don't honor God. It only takes one negative thought about a tough life experience for your emotions to start lying to you. Proverbs 14 is clear that your unchecked emotions can literally break down your entire life. In other words, it's going to rot you out. We believe our emotions about situations of our lives. Sometimes you believe your emotions more than God, but when your emotions are speaking something contrary to God's word, you've got to put them in check. When your emotions keep you home on a Sunday morning, put them in check. When your emotions keep you away from the fellowship of believers, the gospel is clear to put them in check. We face a hardship, and now, we don't want to be in ministry now. We don't want to go to church anymore because I'm just going through all these things, and my emotions are all over the place. And Proverbs is like, it's just rotting your bones away. But listen to what 2 Corinthians 10:5 says in the Message Bible. It says we can use our powerful God tools for smashing warped philosophies, tearing down barriers erected against the truth of God. listen to this, fitting every loose thought and emotion and impulse into the structure of a life shaped by Christ. In other words, I can take all of my emotions. I got to take my emotions that are telling me one thing, and I got to filter it through God's word. There are people right now who should be here in this room today, and they're probably having an emotional moment at home. Lost in the sea of their emotions. Every wave taking you up and down. Man, the voice of insecurities and failures and the voice of the enemy just repeatedly. How about the voice of that spirit of offense? Unchecked emotions have a way of boosting somebody's offendedness. So many have fallen away from the faith, from church, from Christianity because of a spirit of offense. One of the greatest traps of the enemy is this spirit of offense. I've read it to you before in Proverbs 18:19, where it says that a brother who is offended is more unyielding than a city that is walled, a stronghold, a castle. That when you are offended, you are more unyielding than a city who has walls. A spirit of offense will come in and set in and tell you, oh no, that person wronged you. They are so wrong, and you think you have a right to be offended. When Jesus says the only right that we have is to forgive and to love. But that goes out the door when it has to do with us, but we'll tell that to somebody else. And then the spirit of offense is a gossiping spirit too. It gathers all the people around it to be able to listen how they hurt me. Let me come have coffee with me so I can tell you who hurt me and how they did it. I could talk about this person and that person and do it under the guise of needing counsel, but in reality, I just want you to be offended the way I'm offended. And then when you aren't offended the way I'm offended, I'll cut you off too. The spirit of offense seeks to not only just take themselves away from a situation, they want to pull as many people as possible. These voices in your life, wrong voices, wrong choices. How about the simple one, the voice of sin? Hebrews is really clear in Hebrews 3:13, where it says, we exhort one another every day, as long as it is called today, that none of you may be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. That's such a key verse there, the deceitfulness of sin. In other words, sin lies to us. Sin deceives us. And you might say, well, Pastor, what is the deceitfulness of sin? It's this idea that it'll give you fulfillment, but in reality, it doesn't. It deceives us into thinking that it's going to offer a long-term pleasure, but in reality, it's a short-term fix for something deeper in our hearts. And sin tells you, I can offer you fulfillment, I can offer you joy, I can offer you this, but it's just for a moment. And it does, it really does, because the Bible is clear that sin is pleasurable for a season. But seasons have endings. And oftentimes, the season of your sin's joy ends as soon as you are done. And condemnation comes in and guilt comes in. And it promises you fulfillment, but in the end, it only delivers us into bondage and hinders our pursuit from God. Come on, church, are there false things that have cut you off in your life? Are there things that have cut you off from believing the truth? How about the voice of condemnation? Yet another false teacher that makes you feel as if you've gone too far, your sin is too great, and God can't do anything else with you. You see, the voice of condemnation will also make you believe the lies about others that they say about you. The ones who said you were no good, you begin to come into agreement with those lies of other people. Condemnation, that you're just not going to make it. God is done with you. And the voice of shame, that every time you fail, shame comes along, it begins to accuse you, and you begin to believe it. And so you figure, well, why should I even go to church if I'm just going to be a hypocrite? Why should I go to church if I got all these problems? That's exactly what church is for. I always crack up when, it's going to sound crazy, when people come to church and they act as if church has to be a perfect place. Like, I'm not going to go down to the local crack house and be upset when I left my phone in there and it got stolen. I knew the environment that I was in. Oftentimes, we have to realize that church is full of hurt people, and it's going to hurt somebody. But we're on the road to healing. We're on the road to to being made over and made new in God. And we got to be okay that sometimes we're going to come before the Lord with some mess, and he's not afraid of it. That I can come before, because if I live this false lie in my mind that I have to come perfect, then that means that God is unemployed in my life because he's the perfecter. I always go back to that same example. Nobody takes and washes their clothes before they take them to the laundromat. That's what the laundromat's for. It's to wash clothes. We have to ask ourselves, man, is shame having its way in my life? You see, for some people, their false teacher is their success. You made it. You're doing good. God blessed you. God did it in your life. You don't need him no more now because, well, God did it. So it's done. So you just go on and work this field that you're in and do that and do this. And you're so successful. And you look at you, you're blessed. You got money. You got a nice car. You got the house. You got the wife and the kids. And you're living it up. You don't even need God no more. Like, just go get that money. Just go live and then post on Facebook every couple of days like, God is so good to me. And God's like, I don't even know who you are. It's like during those rap, award shows, I want to give honor to God. You were just talking about sex, guns, and drugs. God didn't give you that song. No, we have to think, what has cut us off from believing this truth about God? About God's purposes and God's plans for our lives. The false teachers and the voices of sin, the voice of our success. Another false teacher, another false voice in your life might be your own expectations. That what you thought God should do in a certain time frame, when it doesn't happen, then you're feeling like, man, then God's not real. He's just not there with me. I've been there many seasons in my life where I'm just like, man, I thought that something different would be happening by now. And I have to really get in the secret place and say, God, I got to differentiate between my expectations and your will for my life. Because sometimes you can expect so much from God, and when it doesn't happen, you can expect so much from other people. Sometimes you put godly expectations on human people. And when they let you down, oh man, it's these church folks. No, you listen, they're not God. What stopped you from believing the truth? How many times have your own expectations been your worst enemies? These different voices, and man, it must not be God. It's not you. It's this, it's that. What has caused you from believing all these things, that you are in a place of spiritual lack? You are in a place where God isn't able to do all that he has to do in your life because you have given in to these voices. And maybe some of you are here for the first time in church in a long time, and you realize that maybe something has drawn you away from God. You're like, man, did I ever really sit down and think? You see, wrong voices lead to wrong choices. Wrong passions lead to wrong pursuits. When you have all these things and you're speaking to your heart and you're speaking to your mind, you can't afford to go into this next year in full force trying to follow God with these wrong voices in your heart, in your mind, in your lives. And it's time that you start to begin to uproot these things. And you begin to undo the lies and the works of the enemy. When I was a kid, I used to live on 610 Colorado Avenue. It was an older home, and we had radiators. If you have radiators, I'm not calling your house old. I'm just saying we had radiators. And I hated radiators because every time during the winter time when it started to get cold, we had to air out the radiators. And one time we did it while the boiler was on, and it's sending hot water. And the heaters, the radiators weren't heating up, and we opened it up, and all this hot water was shooting it out because we opened it up too far. And now we had to stick our hands into boiling hot water and to close them. But I have this one memory about these radiators that I will not forget, that not the memory of me busting my head open on them twice, but just different memories. And this one memory I have is baking bread with my dad. And baking bread is cool because you bake bread, we made the dough, he put the yeast in, we did everything. This was during the time there was that little bread factory in Fairfield. I can't remember the name of it right now for the life of me. But there was like this bread factory over on Black Rock Turnpike in Fairfield. And it had like the most amazing cinnamon bread and this bread and that bread. And we would go over there and get bread all the time. But then we said, let's make our own bread. And I was like, yeah, that's a great idea because we have no idea what we're doing. Like, but Dad, let's just make our own bread. And so Dad makes the dough. And then I'm ready just to bake it. And he's like, no, the dough has to rise. I'm like, oh, you know more than me because you're older, whatever you say. And Dad put it on top of the radiator. Now, I'll never forget that as I'm walking by, and I'm looking at this dough, was started like this, ends up being like a whole, it was awesome. I'm like, Dad, look at that. You're like, yeah, that's the yeast. I'm like, but Dad, you barely put any yeast in that dough. But it took the whole loaf. I wish somebody catches this. It doesn't take a lot of compromise. It doesn't take a lot of hatred towards people to make you hate everybody at some point in your life. It doesn't take a lot of sin to infect your whole life. It doesn't take a lot of bad friends. It doesn't take a lot of bad advice. A little yeast, Paul says, leavens the whole loaf. Just a little bit can ruin a lot of it. And Paul says, man, just a little lie has ruined your entire perspective on the grace of Jesus Christ. A little sin, a little compromise in your life this year can lead to an all-out blown backslidden effect in your life. There's more backslidden people in church than out of church. Don't be fooled. Backsliding has nothing to do with the condition of where you spend Sunday mornings. It's your heart. When you have these unchecked emotions, these voices of friends and ungodly counsel speaking to your life and having all this say, man, when do we get back to the heart of what God desires for you and for me? You see, the wrong voices in our hearts take a blazing inferno for God and turns it into ashes and embers. 2018, my heart's desire for you as your pastor is that you would enter into a season where you were returning to the center of who God is in your life. That you wouldn't come to church because you feel like you have to. That you wouldn't be a part of things and seeking after God because you know it's right, but just because it is right and it feels right because you are one with the Father. My heart's desire is that you would be on fire for God, that you would be passionate, that you would be seeking the Lord, that you would be saying, God, I just want more of you, and I'll do what I have to do and go where I have to go. A little yeast leavens the whole loaf. Some of you are sitting right now reflecting on things in your past and saying, man, he's so right, because I remember it was this one small text message, I wish I had a witness, that turned into this in my life. And one party turned into an addiction in my life. And one wrong yes turned into an affair in my life. And not putting my emotions in check caused me to fall away from faith. Not really living like Christ caused me to hate others. Not being able to see like Jesus caused me to have this constant attitude of feeling as if I was justified because the world owes me something when Christ tells me that I should just be like him. And slowly but surely, we turn from being God-focused to being self-focused. And before we know it, all of your Christian walk is about self. And you sing because how it makes you feel. And you worship because how it makes you feel. And you like that sermon because how it made you feel in that moment. But how is your life God-centered instead of self-centered? And Paul says, you were running so good. You were running that good race. But who cut you off? Where's that passion? Where's that fire? I love what Paul says in verse 10, and I'll close with this. Paul says in chapter 5, verse 10, he says, but I have confidence in the Lord. Now, I've got this confidence in the Lord that you will believe no other view than what I've taught you. I've got this confidence that your heart, no matter where it's at right now, Paul says, I got this belief and this confidence that you're going to see that God's not done with you. That you're going to see that there's still better ahead. That you're going to see that God can still work in your life. You're going to see that you've not gone too far from the truth that says God can't clean you up. You're going to understand and you're going to believe this truth. And here's what Paul is saying. And here's point number 3. Paul understands this one thing, that God's truth will always outlast Satan's lies. My dad taught me this principle in my life when somebody lied on me. He said, Flip, a truth always outlasts a lie. I said, Dad, that's really good. What does it mean? I was really young. He said, just think about it, and I did. And when you think about it, man, God's truth in my life, who God says I am, will live past what Satan accuses me of. Who God says I am will live past every area of my life. It'll live past every lie of gossipers who talk about you. It'll live beyond every lie of the enemy trying to cut you off from God's best. It'll live beyond every work of the enemy that is trying to hinder God's promises in your life. It'll take and understand that all of Satan's problems can't stop God's promises. It'll make you understand that every work of the enemy will come tumbling down because I just believe and I'm confident in the Lord. Paul says that you will believe no other truth than what I have taught you, because the word of God, it brings fruit unto itself, because every seed that I planted in you bears fruit unto its own kind, and I know that I planted what was right, and you shall not depart from it, because I taught you well. Every truth of God will outweigh every lie of Satan. Every truth in your life, every work of grace, every work of God. You see, some of you, I know that you stumbled. I know that you've fallen. Some of you, I know that you're not where God has purposed you to be. You're not even near where God needs you to be. And the first thing that we have to do is say, God, there are some lies in my life that I have accepted as truth. There are some things that I've just bought into these things, God, these mindsets and these lies. God, these things have taken me from your best in my life. See, the self-righteous man says, totally good, don't need any of this, Pastor. I'm good. This is not for me, but I know somebody in row 7, seat 4, like, this is definitely, don't start counting or looking around and checking your numbers. Like, they're not numbered, they're lettered, but, oh, Pastor, I know exactly who this is for. Like some of you are so self-righteous, you're probably right now praying that somebody else in this room gets this message, and God's like, dummy, it's for you. For you. It's for you. Like, man, I hope this person understands this. Lord Jesus, touch sister so-and-so's heart, because she cut me off in the cafe line, God. And God's like, no. Your heart is what I want to fix. Because you've made this walk with me about everything else but me. You've let all of your emotions, you've let all of your friends, all of your trials, all of your problems pull you away from the heart of worship in your life. I heard this story some time ago of this song. I love not just hearing a song, but I like hearing why the writers wrote this song. And there's this one song, it's really old, and we're going to sing it here in a moment. Yoshi's going to come out and sing it, and I just want you to reflect as she worships. This song, it was this pastor who got really concerned about his church. It was a young Anglican church. Anglicans are like almost like borderline Catholics, but just not Catholics. They have different belief systems, but everything's the same. But it was a young, up-and-coming Anglican church full of young people and all these different individuals over in England. And he's like, hey, I'm really concerned that we've lost focus of Jesus. We've lost focus of the heart of what we're supposed to be doing. We've lost focus in our worship. We've lost focus in our walk. We've lost focus in the different places of our lives. And so this guy, they had an amazing worship team. This pastor was crazy. He took and he decided to have no instruments anymore in the church for a season. Stripped everything down. And he just put them in a room, the worship team and dozens of young adults and just people. And he puts them in a room, no sound system, just like nothing. And he says, let's worship the Lord. And this song that they're about to sing, it came out of that moment of worship. When everything's pulled back, why am I even here before the Lord today? Am I here for what I can get or what I can give? Am I here today because I needed something? Or am I here because I just love God so much? See, until we start treating Sundays like a date with our dad, rather than I just need a word today, we come to church on Sunday not for revelation but for confirmation. confirmation of what we've been reading all week long and confirmation of how we've been praying all week long. But when we're not doing that, we're always in this constant place of need, and it takes our heart and it shifts it. So would you do me a favor? Would you stand to your feet? Yoshi's gonna come out here. I think Carlos is gonna come remove this table. We're gonna have a moment of just worship with Yosh and Chris. You can leave the lights just like this, Alex. Just leave them just like that. She's gonna come center. Come on, lift your hands all across this place as we begin to worship.
We just worship you, God. We honor you, Lord. When the music fades and all is stripped away, and I simply come, longing just to bring something that's a word that will bless your heart. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself, it's not what you have required. You've searched much deeper within, through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the things I've made it, but it's all about you. Yes, it's all about you, Jesus. Ooh, it's all about you. King of endless worth, no one can express how much you deserve. Though I'm weak and poor, all I have is yours, every single breath. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself, it's not what you have required.
about
And
you.
it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the things I've made, but it's all about you. Come on, somebody. I'm coming back to the, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus.
Come on, in this moment, every head bowed, every eye closed across this sanctuary. Come on, the presence of God is definitely in this place. Come on, with every head bowed, every eye closed, here's the really good news. That God is just not done with your life yet. That God's not done with you, that God's not done with your purpose, God's not done with your calling, God is not done with your spirit, God's not done with your hands, God's not done with your voice, God is not finished with you yet. From the front to the back, you can celebrate because there's hope in Jesus Christ. Come on, that I've not gone too far, that I've not done too much. That as long as there's breath in my lungs, there's hope. In Jesus' name, come on. In this holy moment, just with your eyes closed, that the prayer team can take their positions. Man, God, we are here in your presence, just trusting and believing you. Here's the thing about moments like this, that we can quickly say, hey, let's just move past this. We've got a schedule to keep, and that's all good, that's all fine. But there might be some people in this room who they might need that help to get past this. They need help getting over this. They need help getting through this. They just need prayer. If that's you today, we have people ready to pray for you. Whatever your condition. And maybe you stepping out into the aisles, you taking a step of faith and saying, hey, I'm not going to let anything cut me off again. I'm taking this one head on. I'm just walking into this. I'm going to trust the Lord with all of my heart. I'm going to trust the Lord. I'm coming back to the heart of my walk with the Lord. As they're singing, I'm going to pray really quickly once I say amen. If that's you, you can come down these center aisles, and you got two choices: to really fight what God is doing in your heart, or to receive it. I say, God, I know it's you, and I just don't want anything else but you and your best for 2018 in my life. And you might say, well, man, Pastor, I can take care of that at my seat. Yeah, but there's something in taking a step of faith and making a public declaration by saying, nothing's cutting me off this year. So, Father God, in this moment, every hand, come on, lift your hands, church. Right now, God, every heart that is in need of you, God, give them strength to walk where you need them to walk, God. God, give them strength to forgive, to heal, to move past, God. Lord, this might be an old song, but Lord, do a new work with an old thing, God. Touch our hearts, God. God, those who have never made a commitment to you, those who have never accepted you as Lord and Savior, even now, give them the boldness to walk down these aisles, God, and say, I need Jesus in my life, because I understand that God is not done. Father, I pray that who is sitting to the left of us and to the right of us, and how they might judge us, might not hinder, God, how we approach this moment, God. We just want you in this moment, God. God, I pray that we wouldn't look towards anything else, God, but just in this moment, Lord, our desperate need of you. Lord, make us understand that we are poor in spirit, God, and that in and of ourselves we have nothing to draw close to you, but you give us grace. So in this moment, God, as we worship and we pray, God, if there be any person in this room under the sound of my voice who needs to return to the heart of their worship, that no matter what their position or what they do in this church, that they would make their way down, that they would confess it, God, that they would receive a fresh touch from you in Jesus' name. Come on, church.
We want to thank you again for listening to our podcast. We hope you've been blessed by this sermon. If you would like to share how God may have blessed you through this message, please feel free to share your testimony on our Facebook page at Citywide Church. And while you're there, like our page for daily updates. You can also follow us on Instagram at Citywide Church. Just a reminder, if you would like more information about this ministry or how to support us financially, please visit our website at www.citywidechurch.us. We hope you tune in next week to our podcast. Thank you again. Be encouraged. Stay blessed.